Clark. My debut 1990 September, Bristol City away, to get that opportunity, what thousands of Geordies only dream of.
Lee Clark 1-0.
Williams.
My first goal for Sunderland away at Leicester was a left foot volley. I didn't realise my left foot was for kicking the ball with it as well. I thought it was just for standing it.
Williams for Sunderland.
Hignett.
Playing against Chelsea and to score the first goal there is something that still lives with me now, and it's what most people will talk to me about.
Picked up the ball. Go on, Higgy. You beauty. You Scouser Teesside beauty.
Worshipped every weekend. It's the three legends, banter and rivalry across the northeast. On the Toon, the Cat, the Red.
It's one of those weekends again, fellas. It's the international break, but I'm sure you've still got something to talk about, haven't you? Anything going on, is there? From a Newcastle perspective, I won't go there.
Well, it's one of the few weeks where I'm at the bottom of the pile, really. The other two lads have got something positive to talk about. We've got the 2-0 defeat at Bournemouth. But as you'll hear later, a lot of factors going into that result. I've got the old excuse book out for fun here.
Is it the first time you've needed it, Clarky?
I think so, it does, to be honest.
Where are you going to start, fellas?
Well, you've got to start with Boro, haven't you? What a win that was against Leicester. I mean, listen, Leicester are brilliant. They're a really good team for the championship, and they were excellent on the day. It was a really good football game, and it was decided by a bit of real quality. You know, the free kick, Sam Greenwood's free kick was absolutely top draw, worthy to win any game. Leicester had the chances, didn't put them away on the day. That bad finishing coupled with some good saves by Dieng. It was a really hard fought game. It was a game where you had to be on your mettle. Boro were, certainly defensively they were, which is great to see. They had a couple of chances of their own, but in the end it was decided by a bit of quality, and it was a great 3 points, a really important 3 points. I did say, you know, they needed to win one of the two games between Plymouth and Leicester because of, you know, Leicester were going so well, but to get 4 points from those two games gets them right in the mix now, breathing down everyone's necks. You know, the run continues, doesn't it? It's a fabulous turnaround that Michael Carrick and the team have done.
Yeah, Higgy, to be fair, mate, you've got to give a bit of credit to the Sunderland coaches, to be quite honest, because they allowed him in the barn for hours after training just to take him free kicks. I was talking to Brycer, and mate, it was great. I mean, I was talking to Paul Brycer. He works obviously for us, and he was on about Sam back in the day, and he used to literally, mate, spend hours after training just taking free kicks, and he said his improvement, mate, over a short length of time was just unbelievable, mate. And obviously that showed because it was a fantastic free kick.
Well, it begs the question now, you know, do Boro sign him now, or did he let it go on? I know they've got an agreement to sign him, but what if another club comes in and bids more? Is it an exclusive deal that they've got with Leeds? I very much doubt it. You know, listen, he's getting better and better every game. He's added goals now. I've seen him do it for Leeds 21s. I've seen the quality that he's got, and he's starting to do it now in the Championship. And he's been excellent the last 6-7 games. He's been really good. I think the Sunderland one probably kick-started him, Daz.
I was just going to say, mate, the turning point I think was the Sunderland game, mate. Yeah, he did have a great game, and obviously ever since then he's been highlighted, obviously, you know, week in, week out, hasn't he, since then? And all credit to him,
and that's still with injuries. Listen, Boro's still got a lot of injuries, and they're coping with them. They're coping with them really well, actually, and it doesn't seem to have affected them at all. They've got players now who are back to near their best. You know, I'm thinking of people like Jones, who was excellent defensively, I thought, at the weekend, and needed to be, because Leicester are a slick side. They're a really, really good side, and still haven't changed my opinion of them, even though they've had 2 defeats lately. I still don't see anyone, because of the players and the quality that they've got, I still don't see anyone topping them. I think they'll win the league. But it's
to be
interesting
fair, mate,
now.
We said that a few weeks ago and we've killed them, haven't we?
Well, we have, yeah. So, I mean, listen, from what I've seen of them, Daz, they were slick. They were really good. Yeah. They were technically good. They had some really quick players, some dangerous players. Boro had a couple of chances. Dale Fry had a brilliant header that was saved. I don't know how it was saved, but it was a great save from the keeper. They had one or two other chances. Greenwood had a shot from the edge of the box when really he should have played Matt Crooks in. So they had a couple of bits, Boro, but so did Leicester. Listen, Leicester had a few chances. They ate the woodwork. Like I say, Dieng made 2 or 3 really good saves, and then defended. Boro had to defend really well and did so. So to see the game out 1-0, keep a clean sheet against Leicester, that can only boost their confidence again. And for me, it shows that, they're on the right track. How long it continue for, I don't know. But if they play like they did and as concentrated as they did. There was a couple of things in the game. So Michael Carrick went man-to-man. I think Johnny Howson had a man-to-man job. And I think there was another. Dale Fry had a man-to-man job on Iheanacho as well. There was a couple of things when Boro didn't have the ball, which was different and which was new. But you needed that because Leicester have got so much talent. So they carried out the game plan to a T and got a brilliant result, and it's well done to everyone at the club, I think.
Good stuff, mate. Good.
There'd be a lot of confidence in the club now, Higgy.
Well, it should be, shouldn't it, Clarky? I mean, they've been on such a good run. I think it was they'd won 6 of the last 8 before that game. So there's no reason why not. That'll give them a shot in the arm, beating the league leaders,
Absolutely.
I think everyone would agree that they're favourites to go up. They're the team for me. Even seeing them get beat against Boro, they were still quality. You could still see there's that little difference between them and the rest of the league in terms of quality and consistency as well. I think they've got some really, really good players, dangerous players. So it can only bode well for Boro. They should be full of confidence. They're the form team at the moment. I think Saturday there was Leicester and Boro who'd got the most points out of the Championship in recent games. I think the last 6 games or something. So, there's a lot to be confident about, and really nobody should scare Boro now. They shouldn't be fazed by anyone in the Championship. They've done it against the best team. No, absolutely
after
not.
That result, they should be the players should be thinking, we can take anybody on, and they're showing a strong defensive display to keep a clean sheet against, as you said, and we've all agreed it's the best team in the league with the best squad. So they've done that, and then obviously won the game with a bit of class with a free kick. So they should be going into any game thinking they can win it, no matter who they're playing.
And we know what that Championship's like. The Championship's a nightmare league, isn't it? But if you can get on a run and get full of confidence, sometimes you don't need to play well, and the results just keep going. Like I say, I don't know how long they'll keep it up for, but they seem to have found a level of performance now that's so far removed from what we've seen at the start of the season. Even the bad games now, they're not going that bad. They've got a way of playing. Everyone seems to have knuckled down. They're working really hard for each other, and confidence makes a massive difference. We all know that.
Yeah, again, all we talk about
credit. Sorry, Darren, go on, mate.
Sorry, go on, mate. We've talked about it over previous weeks. Has the international break come at a bad time? Because they're on a run. They're playing well.
I think the only upside of that, I would agree. If I'm in a team that's winning, I want to play every week, and I don't want to break. Yeah. It might give a chance for some of the lads who've been out for quite a while to get fit. Get closer to the squad, get a bit more training in. And then that can only bode well for the squad. But listen, the way they played, I can't see him making too many changes, even if lads were fit. Because if you just look at McNair and Dale Fry, the partnership that they've got now at the back, playing centre half, both of them, has been really good. They've got a good understanding. The both of them are playing really well. So, even if Lenihan comes back fit, and would he get in the team? It'd be a brave manager to put him in the team after the performances that those two have put in. So everyone sort of upped the game a little bit. You see Van den Berg, he played right back, had a really good game. it's Engel, left back. Everyone had said what a ropey signing he was at the start of the season. He's come back with some really strong performances and looks now like a decent player in the Championship. So everything's coming together. That coupled with the run they're on, they're just on a really high moment, if you like, and it doesn't seem to matter who plays. They've got a way of playing that's it seems to be hard to play against, but they're scoring goals and winning games.
Yeah, the point I was just going to make, lads, I just think it's credit to Michael Carrick and his staff and the players, because sometimes when you're in a run like they were at the start of the season, like you were talking about, Higgy, the only way it changes if the manager gets changed. But what Boro have done is the same group have turned it around and been, as you say, have turned into the form team in the Championship in the last 6-7 games. So real credit, and you can tell about the group they've got, the trust in each other. So brilliant news for the Boro fans.
Well, and isn't that a brilliant thing to see as well, Clarky, where a chairman sticks with a manager who's going through a rough time, the team are going through a rough time. You look at the Birmingham stuff, Birmingham...
They've done it the opposite way.
Unbelievable. Well, they've lost the last 6, haven't they, away games or something on the spin. So, I mean, it just shows you that changing a manager isn't the solution sometimes. Sticking with a manager and showing the players that, hang on a minute, doesn't matter how many games you lose, he's my man. So don't back the wrong horse and think, oh, he'll be out soon and I'll be back in.
Correct.
We're sticking with him, and players have got to then knuckle down and respect the fact that, he's not going to leave, so I've got to get my head down if I want to get in the team here. And that just shows it. That shows me as a player, I can't mess about here. If I'm not in the team and I'm a bad apple, I'm going. Whereas I've been in squads before where people have been out, they've been a bad apple, and they're saying, oh, I'm not bothered because he's going to get the sack soon, and they'll hang around and hang around, and it makes the atmosphere horrible.
Well, that's happening more and more in today's football world, isn't it?
Yeah, because chairmen are too quick to pull the trigger, aren't they, and say, well, we've lost 4 games, let's get rid of the manager, or we've lost 6 games, let's get rid of the manager. It's not the way. You see clubs who stick with managers, that's the way forward for me, where they can build something, and people know, hang on a minute, he's here for the long haul, so we've got to dig in here. Even if we're not in the team, it doesn't matter. He's not going anywhere, and we're losing games. It doesn't matter. I've got to work hard if I'm going to get in the team.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to trust the process, mentality. Mate.
Yeah,
you've got to trust the process. At the end of the day, nothing changes overnight. Things take time, and if if managers don't get time, mate, what's the point? What's the point in chopping and changing? It's ridiculous. You've got to get a steady flow, and obviously let everyone bed in, and and obviously get their way of playing, accept their ideas over to the players, because it's difficult to adapt at times,
especially when you're changing a team. If you're a manager who's in the middle of having to change a team, you're going to have a bad run. All clubs, listen, 99% of the clubs, 95% of the clubs will have a blip somewhere along the way where they'll lose 3-4 games on the spin. Just because a club does that doesn't mean that you've got the wrong manager. It just means he's changing the team, and let him find his way, let him find his players. He might not be able to get players in he wants. He might not be able to get players out he wants. Give him time, and like you say, Daz, it's a process, and it always is a process, and you've got to trust in what you're doing. If you've got a vision as a football club, stick with it. Just because you've had some bad performances or bad results doesn't mean that your whole ethos changes. You stick with what you're doing. You might tweak things in it, but the end goal and the way you get there is still the same. And it's not, for me, the most successful clubs aren't ones who change the manager every time a club loses 3-4 games. That doesn't happen, because you're forever then trying to get players out, get players in, find a squad that your manager wants. They lose 6 games, they sack him, they change the way they play. And there's no pattern or thought of direction of the club there for me. No. So for me, the best way is, you've got a manager, listen, you've got 3 seasons a minute. This is where we want to be after 3 seasons. If we're there, brilliant. If we're not, then we'll have to have a conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
2 things from that Leicester game. First and foremost, I heard Greenwood's free kick compared to Higgy's free kick in the cup final video. So I've heard that one, Higgy. You'll tell me yours.
It wasn't that good, Dave.
Yeah. And and secondly, for all 3 of you, something you haven't touched on yet, but I've heard discussed among the fans quite a bit in the week since the game is the tactical change, because it was a completely different Boro approach to what they normally do under Michael Carrick. There was a lot of man marking going on. There was a lot of gifting Leicester possession, which is normally the Boro game. How difficult is it for the three of you? How difficult as a player is it to get used to playing a set way under a manager, and then all of a sudden, with a week's notice, he says, we're going to tear up the script and we're going to do it completely different this weekend?
No, I think I heard that point that Higgy made, and straight away I was like, oh, it doesn't seem to be, Michael Carrick hasn't seemed to use that system a lot, going man to man and worrying about the opponents. But sometimes when you've got a team as good as Leicester, or they're the Man City of the Championship, aren't they? So it's like when you're in the Premier League and you go to Man City, you've got to do something a bit different, because if you just go there and play your normal game, i.e. if for example, if Newcastle go there and try and go full throttle front foot for the whole game, it's against Man City, they're going to get picked off because they have that many good players. So I think what Michael's shown there is a flexibility in his tactics, and he's done something a bit different, which has allowed the team to get the win. And hey, listen, football, I say, you know, if you give them the right information, they don't need a long time to take it on board. Some who cannot take it on board will use it as an excuse, but I think Middlesbrough and the whole have some intelligent football players in there. So when the manager has asked certain players to do a specific job, i.e. a man-marking job, they've got on with it. That's not the hard part, to be honest. If you're given a specific role and just told to look after one player and the opposition, that's quite simple. It's about what the other players then do to combat that. So I think pat on the back from Michael and his staff, and also the players for delivering the performance and result with a little tweak to the system.
I would see it as a challenge, Dave, to be honest. I would see it as a challenge. You know, I would see it as my manager's putting me up against him, you know, because he believes that, you know, I can do a job on him. You know, and I think, you know, it's probably it might be from a psychologist's point of view of, like, you know, I can get the better of him, and if you win majority of the battles over the course of the game, and obviously on the pitch, you know, that you give yourself an hell of a chance of winning the game.
Yeah. I don't think he wanted to make it an open game, and I didn't think he wanted the lads pressing further forward because of the space that it'll leave behind, because they are quick, Leicester. They've got some really quick players, you know, and like Clarky says, you've got to adapt. Good players will adapt, and it's not just the easy bit is saying to Johnny Howson, you've got Dewsbury Hall. When we haven't got the ball, you've got Dewsbury Hall. Saying to Dale Fry, you just follow Iheanacho everywhere. Everyone else will. It's what everyone else does around you, and it's what you do when you've got the ball. So, you know, for example, Johnny Howson, would he just follow Dewsbury Hall all around? No, because when Boro have got the ball, he needs to do something for them as well. He needs to be available for passes and stuff. So it's a really, you do need some clever players to do it. You need some experienced players to do it, which they did. But I just think he didn't want to stretch the game. He didn't want, because he knew Leicester had ability, and if the Leicester player would have got it and stepped past one player, then the game's open up then. And he didn't. He wanted to make it a lot more compact. He didn't want the space in behind. He did say, right, yous can have the ball. We'll sit back a little bit, make it compact, go man-to-man in these areas with these two. And it did. It sort of nullified them. But listen, they're a good side, and they still created chances. And they were still able to break through sometimes. And mostly due to bad passes by Middlesbrough. It has to say, you know, there was one by Jones that almost put Iheanacho in, and you can't legislate for stuff like that. There was a mistake by Dieng with a kick out that he actually made a brilliant save and redeemed himself with. But on the whole, I thought they carried out the plan brilliantly, and it did nullify those two players to a certain extent.
So I've got to ask, I mean, I know we've got to talk Sunderland and Newcastle, but Clarky, I'd love your input to this one. So we're discussing, or you discussed earlier, the change in the way Boro approach. We've talked about players and adopting a different tactic. And I think you said, you know, it's not, for good players, it's not difficult to adopt those changes and put them into practice. I've got to ask you about Birmingham and Wayne Rooney, because that's the line that's been spun, isn't it? About, you know, it's all the changes I'm trying to make. They're not used to the way we're playing. But they've gone from 6th to what, 18th, 19th?
Yeah, they've took 1 point from 18, and he seems to have a commodity that we've just been talking about, that 99% of managers haven't got. Because I tell you what, there could be another 5-10 sackings if there was a manager or a coach with that sort of record, with 1 point from 6 games. They could be gone. So, and I think what he's got, he's been brought in by a group of people who want the A-list, ex-player to become the top manager. They want all the bells and whistles that come with it, the new ownership there. And at this moment in time, it isn't working. And what they'd done the opposite of what we were talking about earlier, about Steve Gibson giving a manager who was having a little bit of a tough time, giving them time to turn things around. They got rid of a manager who had the team in a better position than they should have been in terms of the finances, the situation. I know this new ownership group have come in at Birmingham, but they hadn't, invested a lot in the group because they'd missed the transfer window. So John Eustace hadn't had huge backing in terms of the Championship, and he's got the team playing in a specific way. And sometimes, it's all right saying you want your team to play in a certain way, but if the players and the group of players you've got cannot do that, you have to do something different in the short term to get results, to get you through to the next transfer window, to allow you to get players in who you believe can take on your system and play the way you want to play. Because it's not as simple as I've got this philosophy, I'll go into club X, Y or Z and I'm going to make them play this way. If the players cannot perform that way, it is difficult. Now, and I've always been a big believer in if you go into a club and you think the fitness levels aren't where they should be, keep that to yourself and just get the team fit. I was a bit disappointed in Rooney's quotes to say that the players weren't as fit as he wanted them to be to go on and do what he wanted, which sounds to me like he's trying to play a high pressing game, win the ball high up the pitch, and then play quick football through the thirds. And it's a little bit of a cheap shot on the previous coach, especially a coach who had them in the top 6, batting above where they probably should have been. So yeah, it'd be interesting to hear from Darren, because obviously he's seen the 6th game of Wayne's tenure so far. I think Higgy, when I asked him, it was the first game, so it was a little bit of a tough one to answer. But 6 games in, you'd like to think there was little bits and pieces. How did they play, Darren?
I didn't think they played that well, mate, to be quite honest. I think Sunderland dominated the game. I think Sunderland had a little spell in the first half where they went wayward for about 15 minutes. Sloppy passing. They were just giving the ball away in stupid areas, and they were more or less inviting Birmingham on, really, to be quite honest. But like I say, Sunderland started off really, really well. Job looked, like he wanted it, and he wanted it bad. And fair play, he got his goal, but he also should have got another one as well. He had a fantastic chance, but unfortunately didn't make the most of it. Could you see like a pattern of play that Birmingham, clubs have an identity. I always look at like Swansea. They've had since the Brendan Rodgers era, possibly even before Roberto Martinez, they've been a club that's been this total football play out from the back. It's been the club philosophy, no matter what manager or coaches took over. And by what I'm trying to read from the outside, and obviously I take a little bit of an interest with Birmingham being my ex-club, so I'm listening and reading and watching what's going on, and to me it's like he's trying to change the way the team play. Is there any indication that you can see anything developing in that way? Yeah, there was an indication, mate, that they did try and play out. They did try and play through the thirds, and for me it looked obvious. It looked obvious that they didn't really suit it. It didn't really suit them. They became quite nervous on the ball in the first half. Like I say, they had that spell in the first half towards the end of the first half, but barring that, mate, they looked out of sorts. And I think towards the end of the game, the shape and everything just got erratic. Players were all over the place, which is understandable because obviously they were chasing the game and obviously chasing the points. But it's evident that he is trying to change the style of play, which obviously, like we said, is a process and does take time, but I don't, the Birmingham fans, are not willing to, well, by the sounds of it, are not willing to give him that time. I mean, obviously they got excited when they got the goal, and obviously they were on the front foot at that point. But for me, mate, Sunderland dominated, I would say, 3/4 of the game.
I'll tell you what I did notice, Daz. The amount of time a Sunderland player came off, got turned, started running with the ball, and the Birmingham players just jogged with them. Even when there's three around him, they just backed off until they're getting shots at goal. There was one that hit Ruddy in the face. I'm not sure who hit it, but he came, got turned, he was running. There was 4 of them around him, and he just kept running and running. In the end, they showed him onto his left foot, let him get a shot away when he shouldn't have got anywhere near the box. And they were lucky he didn't score it, because it smashed Ruddy in the face, went behind for a corner. But they looked so disorganised.
They did, mate, and they looked disjointed, mate. For me, it didn't suit them. It didn't suit them trying to play. It didn't suit them the way that they set out. Ruslan had a great chance early in the first few minutes. I feel for him a little bit. Yeah, because he does everything, mate. He literally does it. He works his socks off. He creates chances. He creates opportunities for other players. He struck the post in the first half, and he just needs that little bit of early look. I think it's one that maybe bounces in off his shin or something, and I think that'll give him the confidence to go ahead and get more goals.
And the other thing I noticed, Daz, was the set pieces. How poor they were at set pieces, Birmingham, defending them. The amount of times a Sunderland player got free right in the middle of the 6-yard box, or got an effort on goal from a corner or set piece, it was unbelievable. The goal, the Bellingham goal was a prime example of it.
Totally, mate.
He stood in the middle of the 6-yard box.
He nearly had a chance just after that as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He hit the post didn't get a good connection on it, did he?
Yeah, he hit the post, and then Ruslan, from a similar type of position you were talking about there, Ruslan hit the post as well, and like you say, they just looked a little bit, they looked disjointed, they looked all over the shop, and I think, like I say, when they had that spell and they got the goal, it was all down to Sunderland. I don't know whether they took the foot off the gas or they just become sloppy. It kind of looked like it at times where it was a bit of a training game, and Sunderland would dominate, and then they were getting, like you say, pulling off in areas that, Birmingham players didn't go with them, they allowed them to turn. And for me, if, let's say, for instance, hypothetically, if it had stayed 1-1, if Birmingham had nicked it, it'd been an absolute tragedy, mate, because Sunderland dominated for 3/4 of the game. But like I say, mate, he looks like he's trying to change it. I mean, he spent a lot of time arguing with the fourth official. He spent a lot of time arguing with the referee to try and get decisions, this, that and the other. He's got obviously John O'Shea in there now with him. So I'm assuming obviously he's kind of just stepped in and obviously the process is in place to change the style of their play.
Fellas, we've had a couple of questions coming from Luke, who's in the Boro. It is a couple of questions. And if you want to get your comments through to the Three Legends, you can WhatsApp us in the studio, 0330 043 2002. That's 0330 043 2002. Couple of questions here, fellas. First one, on what you're discussing, do you think it's hard on players if they have a big turnover of managers? Whether the players are having to adapt to a new shape, style of coaching, or even those who are out of favour with the new management. How difficult is it for them? That's the first one.
Well, if the players produce results, they wouldn't have a turnaround the coaches. It's as simple as that. So if they got their fingers out and got results on a regular basis, they'd have the same manager throughout the season. It's as simple. So it's quite as basic as that, Dave, to be honest with you, to answer the caller's question.
I think it gives players who were out the team a lift. And that's why sometimes you see a bounce. When players feel like they're not involved or out of it, and a new man comes in, they feel a new lease of life, and sort of that's where you get this new manager bounce from, and a new way of playing. Sometimes, say for example, you've been playing defensively, and a new man comes in and wants to play fast flowing, free attacking football, and you can enjoy it a bit more. You know, you get a little bit of enjoyment, and there's a bit of freedom there. I think that helps. But at the same time, Clarky's dead right. You know, if the players were doing the jobs properly, it doesn't matter what system you're playing. If you're good players, you win football matches. And obviously, to change your manager, that hasn't been happening. So I think whilst it can work, I think if you know, like Michael had proved last year what a good manager he did and what a great job he'd done, just because he's had a blip this year, a really poor start, doesn't mean he's a bad manager. It just means he's finding his way again, and he lost so many players that he had to try and, while signing some, find a way of playing that suited them. And I think that's the same all over. So again, I'll go back to it. Changing manager isn't the way to go every time.
Second part of the question then, how hard is it as a player? So take your manager hat off, Lee, Higgy. Put your player boots back on. How hard is it as a player to play under a manager that's under increasing pressure?
Yeah, I've been in that position a couple of times. Especially in the latter part of my career when I was a lot more experienced. When I played for Graham Souness at Newcastle, Graham was never the choice at the start. They didn't want Sir Bobby Robson to be fired. So when Graham came in, he had a massive, you know, like hole to fill or a void or be a replacement for someone who was adored, and they felt that Sir Bobby shouldn't have been fired in any way. So that was always going to be difficult. But he was such an experienced manager, and I was coming towards the end of my career as well, and I used to watch how managers behaved under certain circumstances, and he was a brilliant example of, you know, he uses the word proper man. That's one of his favourite sayings, and he shielded. He not once did us as the players feel, you know, he was under severe pressure from the fans, and not once did he bring that to the fore with us. The training was still light-hearted at the right times. Obviously, when we had to work on the tactical side, it was always there, but he still made it a good place. And when he eventually left, it's tough when you see good people. You know, Paul Bracewell, he was an ex-teammate of mine and then assistant manager at Sunderland, and he signed us for Fulham. So when Paul lost his job there, I certainly did, you take it a bit personal that you haven't fulfilled what you set out to do to keep them in that position. So it is tough. Ozzy Ardiles was just an exceptional bloke for all us young players at Newcastle as kids. He gave us all a chance. Other managers mightn't have done that. So we all had an affinity with him. And so I've got to say, in my career, when it has happened, I've felt a little bit guilt towards me not probably doing my job as well as I should have to help the manager get the results to stay in the job.
Yeah, I was just going to say there, like, I think as a player you're under pressure as well, you know, because you're feeling the pressure of the manager, and you know, if you're not producing the goods on a weekly basis, you know, you're letting him down, you're letting yourself down, but you're letting the manager down as well. And you know, I think from that point of view, mate, because it's not just, you might not just get rid of the manager, you might get rid of the players as well. You know, so I think you feel under pressure as a player as well, on top of the pressure that obviously if a manager's brought you in, like Clarky said there, you know, you feel that added pressure because, you know, he's brought you in, you know, and he's looking at you to help him obviously continue in his job.
And I tell you what else has happened with that type of stuff. Sorry, Higgy, you'll back us up with this one, Higgy, as well. In today's world as well, you know, you hear the worst sayings. I hate. He's lost the dressing room, and the manager's lost the dressing room. He cannot do this, he cannot do that. The players have stopped. They've down tools. I mean, I know the two lads. I've obviously played with Darren, and I've played against Higgy many times and come across them, and I know they're exactly the same type of personality as me. I've had fallouts with managers, bust-ups and whatever, and fallouts, not to the extreme where it's just the relationship's broken down, but I've had bust-ups, but never once have I gone into a game and thought, you know what, I'm not going to give me best today because if we lose, this guy might get the sack.
Yeah.
Never, ever in my career ever thought that, because, you know, we were all accountable to the fans, the clubs we played for, Newcastle, Sunderland, Middlesbrough. we were being held accountable for our performances, not really the managers at the time. You know, Brian Robson, if he had lost a couple of games, it wasn't him getting questioned. Kevin Keegan, it wasn't Kevin getting questioned. Peter Reid, it was the players. We were being held accountable, and rightly so, by the supporters of the club. But now it's flipped on its head a little bit, and it's a lot to do with the social media stuff as well, where they, you know, after, like we've talked about, I mentioned it about Rooney, that, you know, whether I agree with it or not, but some managers get 6 games, they get 1 point and they're fired. Because it's like, oh, well, the dressing room haven't took him, he's lost the dressing room and all this, you know, them horrible statements that I hear hearing, and that's the difference in terms of
them statements do my head in, Clark. You get them all, and you've mentioned some corkers there, but the other one is no plan B. He hasn't got a plan B, or you know what I mean? It's like, wow, do these people know what you do every week in training, or do they know what you discussed with your coaches, or it's like, you know, it's like you've never thought about this before. It's like they're talking as if, well, he hasn't thought about that, or he hasn't thought. Yeah, and you all know, as a player and as a manager, you never switch off. And you get too involved in it. Certainly as a manager, you do get too involved in it. And sometimes the things that you were doing well, you can lose them because you think that much about what you want to do and how you're going to improve it and how you want to change it. You go away from doing sometimes what you know and what your philosophy is just to get a result.
Just to change it.
You're thinking about a million and one different things. So when people come out and say things like that, what can you do? You just have to laugh at yourself, don't you?
Yeah. Well, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because you know that's being said quite a bit. So, but that's Dave. They're the answers from both a playing point of view, and with myself and Higgy, and I know Daz has done some coaching from a managerial point of view. You know, I think we came from an era where it was about our level of performance as players, that nothing else was going to affect us trying to be the best player we could be on any given day.
Cracking, appreciate it. If you want to get your comments through to the lads, it is the 3 legends: Lee Clark, Craig Hignett, Darren Williams across the northeast on the Cat, the Red and the Toon. You can WhatsApp the studio 0330 043 2002. That's 0330 043 2002. Fellas, time for a quick break. When we come back, we've still got to talk Sunderland. We've still got to talk Newcastle and what's gone on last weekend, plus whatever else you've already got lined up. But we'll do that next across the northeast.
It's the 3 legends across the northeast. Clark, legend. Williams, legend. Hignett, legend. WhatsApp us, call or send a voice message. Banter at its best. 033 00 43 2002.
Right across the northeast, the Toon, the Cat and the Red.
Okay then, Darren, Lee, Craig, back to you guys.
Well, we've got to talk about Newcastle now, Clarky, haven't we? I'm sorry, mate.
Lads, come on, man. I thought you forgot.
Well, obviously, poor result, wasn't it, at Bournemouth?
Yeah, listen, mate, poor result, really probably the poorest performance of the season as well, even take into considering the start of the season we had when we, I think, lost 3 out of the first 4. Not a lot of positives to take from the game in terms of the general performance, and thoroughly, you know, deserved to lose the game, which was disappointing. And as you know, I was over in Germany last week as well for the Dortmund game. Felt the lads, you know, put up a good effort against a real good, experienced Champions League team in Dortmund, but came up a bit short. But in a game like that, you see a few positives and you think, well, Livramento had done well, and you know, young Miley comes on and looks quite an accomplished player for a 17-year-old. But certainly at Bournemouth, no positives. So, you know, as Daz was talking about with regards Middlesbrough not wanting the international break, I think Eddie did. I think the team looked jaded, they looked tired. The injury list's taking its toll massively. I mean, you can get the violins out if you want, lads, but I'm going to go through the list. Jacob Murphy's out till 2024, Dan Byrne 2024, Sven Botman 2024, Callum Wilson 2024, Matt Targett 2024, Tonali obviously with his ban. and then you've got the likes of Elliot Anderson back just around the end of the year, Harvey Barnes, Lewis Hall, and then potentially Miguel Almiron could be fit, even though I'm a bit unsure about that one. I'm going off with a hamstring against Bournemouth. I'm not sure they recover in 2 weeks' time like a hamstring injury. I mean, I was never quick enough to get a hamstring injury, so I've never experienced one of them. Alexander Isak, he's due back for the Chelsea game, and obviously Fabian Schär, he pulled out of the Swiss squad. So, you know, when we talked at the start of the season, I remember on one occasion I was saying I was excited by the quality we had on our bench. At the moment, it's a depleted squad, because I think Eddie, in one of the games, he had 5 full-backs and 2 keepers. So I think it's took its toll on my lads, to be honest. And I'm hoping 1 or 2 of those guys are back for the Chelsea match, to be fair, because we need them. You know, we need a little bit of help.
Yeah, it's going to affect them massively, isn't it?
Trippier's point, wasn't it, Clarky? You seen him go over to the fans at the end, and I don't know if you've seen it on social media, but
I was angry with that, Higgy. I was angry with that from a fan's point of view. I'm a fan.
Well, I think the fan, to be fair to him, has come out and apologised, didn't he? Said it was a heat of the moment thing, and he's sorry, but it's still not. You know, it's not nice.
One thing that these lads cannot be accused of in these last 2 years, you know, since Eddie's been the manager, they've turned this football club around. They've turned it on its head. They've give the pride back. You know, they've took it to levels quicker than we could have imagined to get to, and they've been superb. And you know, we need, as fans, we need to back that team when they're having a little bit of a tough time. You know, and he was quite rightly pointing out, come on, let's, you know, take a cool hard look at this. Look at the injury list we've got. Look at where we're having to do. One of the big things that Eddie likes to do is he likes to play with a team that has pace, you know, can hit teams on the break. I mean, Anthony Gordon done well as a striker for England under 21s in the summer, but it's not his ideal position. And you know, we didn't have a replacement off the bench if something had happened as well, and you lose Almiron's pace. It becomes a little bit easier for Bournemouth to defend with a higher line. Then they're not worried about getting hit with that speed anymore, and they can dominate the ball, which they basically did on the night. They fully deserved the result. So I'm hoping that there will be a bit of good news in terms of certainly Alexander Isak and potentially Almiron, even though I'm not convinced he can recover in 2 weeks from a hamstring strain.
Is this all just with the volume of games, Clarky? Do you think the Champions League has took its toll like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, you go into a higher level of competition, and it takes more toll on the body. And you know, when Dortmund, I think what happened, I think everyone got excited with the PSG result, and they didn't probably give the respect to Dortmund that they should have. When you think about, these are a very, very experienced Champions League club. You know, German players always sufficient, and German clubs efficient in the work that they do. And the 2 games we had against them, they showed that their efficiency was brilliant. They got the 2 results, deserved both results, and looked an accomplished Champions League team really. And I think all these high profile games have just took its toll on the group of players when they're trying. And Eddie's not being a manager who rotates a lot, especially his back 4 as well, but he's been forced into doing that. So hey, let's see. There's still a lot to play for, but I just hope that this injury list doesn't derail us, you know.
Clarky, do you think this will make Eddie think about the squad and think he might want more bodies? And if they are going to be involved in European competition, then the squad needs to be a bit bigger with a bit more quality?
I think it's sent a message to everybody, Higgy. I think it's sent a message to the owners. I'm sure Dan Ashworth and Eddie have had numerous conversations and been aware that when the squad's fully fit, they have a really good squad, but not a big squad for all the competitions that they were involved in. So I think this is probably, you know, in a funny sort of way, it could be a bit of a blessing, because it shows you that they do still need, you know, numbers and quality in numbers as well, not just to fill up the squad. I think I go back to last season, you know, the brilliant year when finishing the Champions League. But halfway through that season, went to Sheffield Wednesday in the FA Cup, and Eddie made a few changes, and we got beat off Sheffield Wednesday at Hillsborough in the Cup. And I think what that showed everybody, the fans, but more importantly the owners, that, you know, the players in behind the starting 11, 12, 13 players probably weren't good enough to take where we wanted to go. And I think they acted on that. So I'm sure that, you know, come January, even though it's a really difficult month to bring players in, they'll try and give Eddie a bit more depth in the squad in terms of being able to handle suspensions and injuries.
It's a freakishly long list, though, isn't it, Clarky, for long-term injuries?
It's crazy. It's crazy. And when you look at them, you know, you're speaking about the players. It's players who play regular. I know all of them kind of play together, but they've all had a substantial amount of games this season. Jacob Murphy, Dan Byrne, even young Elliot Anderson's played a lot this season. Sven Botman, when he's been fit, played every game. Harvey Barnes is probably the one. He came in as a new signing, and you know he's come off the bench a few times, so he probably hasn't had the run of games that he wanted. Callum Wilson, obviously, our top scorer. Young Lewis Hall, he's been in and around it. Obviously, Miggy Almiron's played loads since. So yeah, players, Alexander Isak. Target's probably is another one that falls into the category. Hasn't played a lot in the last 12 months. But and obviously the Tonali situation's just something really unique in football, isn't it? So,
of course it is,
but listen, you know, they're going to have to cope. If as I've rattled off, 5 or 6 of them aren't ready till the new year, they're going to have to cope, and it's coping in the now after this international break. You know, guys, we've been involved in it as players. It's hectic now after this international break. When you're coming into December and early January, the games are just non-stop on at all levels. Exactly. Even the Premier League. The Premier League starts mirroring the Championship with the number of games you've got. So you know, it's probably the worst time to have an injury problems. Where when you have all these games coming up. But
Clarky, do you think he'll still prioritise the Champions League then, or do you think he'll sort of give that up a little bit and make sure that the lads are fit and fresh for the Premier League games?
Do you know what, Higgy? It's a difficult one because I've never noticed that he's prioritised anything since he's been the manager in terms of he's went for every game and he's fielded his strongest team in every match and every competition to win it. And that's shown, and it's I think what's given him a little bit of belief is the cup ties, the Carabao Cup tie results, both Man City at home and Man United away, when they brought lads in and they've done brilliant jobs, and he thought, well, I can give them a chance in the Champions League as well. They deserve it. It all depends. I mean, if they don't get a win in the next game at PSG, I mean, they're certainly out of the running of qualifying for the next stage of the Champions League. It's just whether they can get the third place to carry on the European campaign into the new year through the Europa League, you know, or whether if they go out and he thinks, well, do I need a Europa League in the second half of the season where I can just concentrate on maybe he's winning a domestic cup, or, you know, even though I've got Chelsea, I mean, tough route again, but a domestic cup and try and getting in them top 4 places again.
Clarky, what effect would not getting in the top 4 have on them, do you think?
Do
you think as long as they're in Europe, they're on track? Whether that be
I think
Europa or Champions League?
I think when you look at new clubs that get into the top 4, it is tough for them to compete at that level. So if they were to get the next season, and it also affects that the domestic stuff, the league program. So I think if we could get into Europe, whether that be Europa League or Champions League again next season, would be another good season for us. I think we'll keep building, and but you know what the expectations like, Higgy, we've been there. You do something once and teams want you to try and do it again, if not better it. The expectation level rises, and it's like, oh God, we've got to do that again. But it's not as easy, is it? You look at now what's happening. Liverpool have come back to a really high level. Aston Villa look a real good squad, and Pochettino's got
Spurs
Chelsea
going all right,
playing well, Spurs coming back.
Yeah.
So it's
Arsenal,
going to be tough. It's going to be. You've got obviously Man City and Arsenal already there. So yeah, it's going to be a tough old ask.
Well, I tell you what, lads, if Eddie needs an extra pair of legs coming off the bench, particularly in the centre half position, then Ian Murter, I'm sure, would love to pull the shirt on and get a run out in front of 50-odd thousand at St James's. And he joins us now. Ian, evening.
What, with my hips, Dave? Come on.
I've seen you dancing, mate. There's nothing the matter with your hips.
Yeah, the hippie shake, was it? How are you, gentlemen?
Well, all good, Ian, thank you.
How are you?
I'm fine. Listen, I've got a show with a little bit of a difference this week, because I can guarantee you that my first guest, none of you will ever have heard of. In fact, most of our listeners haven't heard of him either. His name's Dave Williams. He's a 37-year-old Newcastle fan who lives in Tynemouth and works for a law firm. And what I wanted to do this week, as the international break, I just wanted to talk to a supporter. Not necessarily about how his team's doing, but what life is like as a supporter. He was in Dortmund, he was in Milan. I was asking him, how does he get away with it with his wife? How does he get away with it with his work? Did he enjoy Dortmund despite the result? And it's interesting, and I think what he says, a lot of fans of whatever club they'll empathise with it, because, I think as supporters, they enjoy away trips, don't they? They go to the pub, they meet their mates, and they sing and dance, and although results away from home don't tend to be as good as at home, I think the trips and the day out tend to be better. So
Well,
I can't believe you got me Uncle Dave on.
He said, Ian, can I ask a question? Does his wife and work know he's been at Dortmund and Milan?
Oh yes,
If not, they do now.
I'm pretty sure they do. Anyway, my second guest, I don't know if any of you know, Martin Blackburn of The Sun, who actually covers Manchester City. Now, the reason I asked Martin onto the show was, apart from the fact he did have a spell earlier in the millennium covering Newcastle, and I think he was at the Middlesbrough UEFA Cup final in Eindhoven against Seville, but he's a Manchester City reporter for The Sun, goes everywhere, he's covered them for a long, long time. What I wanted to do was ask him where Newcastle are on the journey compared to Manchester City. What's happened to Everton today? I'm sure there's a lot of worried Manchester City and Chelsea fans with financial fair play, etc. But we're going to leave that alone. I just want to find out what he thinks about Newcastle and on this journey to, well, let's face it, the club hierarchy says the journey they wanted to end up being the world's number one club, which is what Manchester City are. So I'll be very interested, because I know he still keeps a very close eye on the Magpies.
Cracking stuff. So Ian Murter, black and white and red all over, immediately after the Three Legends comes to an end at 7 o'clock, which means you've got about 5 minutes, fellas.
Aye. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about the Everton situation, because that's come out today, and when you look at, Everton have broken, is it one regulation? And then Man City, I think there's 115. Chelsea, I don't know how many they've broken, but to get 10 points deducted, is that harsh? Is it too harsh?
I
was involved
with immediate effect as well.
Points deducted with immediate effect as well. So it's been going on for a couple of years, I think, hasn't it? Yeah, on goal difference. Yeah. So the 2 points from safety, which you think they would, considering how the league is, I think Sheffield United will probably go, Burnley will go, and probably Luton. You would think they'd have enough to get out of it, but it's easy saying that. And yet then the effect, what effect will it have on the players? What effect will it have on the management? I know Everton as a football club are going to appeal it, so then there's more drama around the whole football club. How does it affect everyone? I think it's harsh. I think it's really, really harsh. And like you said, Daz, with the immediate effect thing, it's 10 points.
Because there's been no immediate effect from anywhere else, has there? Do you know what I mean?
No, I think they overspent by about £19 million.
Yeah.
And in the grand scheme of things, in the Premier League, I mean, that's out, is it?
Yeah, it's nothing,
and that
is
was
it?
all
Yeah.
because they brought players in, didn't finish where they would in the league, where they projected to finish, couldn't sell players who they wanted to sell. So it wasn't like they were a million miles away. Probably one sale gets them back.
You're
okay
right.
again.
I was just going to say that, Higgy. You're right. What I heard today is on their asset sheets, they had Richarlison down as £80 million asset to sell, and they sold him for 60. So that extra 20 million would have cleared that 19 million quid. So it's as simple as that, isn't it? You know what I mean? And I think when you're talking those figures, and I know the rules and the regulations and the laws, whichever way you want to put it, are there for a reason, but it's a severe ruled, sanction, 10 points. And you've mentioned other clubs that have had other types of charges.
And why hasn't all that stuff come into light now? So Everton has been going for a couple of years. The others have been going similar, I would imagine, the same, because we've been talking about it forever. I mean, have they got better lawyers? Have they managed to delay it because of something? Or is this a case of
be an
Everton were
couple
first,
of weeks, months, isn't it?
Yeah, Everton first, you're next Chelsea, or you're next Man City. I mean, Man City have got 115 charges. 115. Yeah. Everton have got 1. And they had 10 points deducted. So either Man City are going to get a ridiculous points deduction and fine, or the FA have made a rod for their own back. I know the FA wanted Everton to be done 12 points, but the independent panel only done 10. I mean,
well, if Man City get done if Man City get done for every charge, they could be playing in the Sunday morning alphabet league over here.
It's 1,150 points deduction. That's what they'd get if they stuck to it. Where does that put them?
Haaland scores 1,000 goals a season.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just. I mean, it is going to be really interesting, isn't it, to see the outcome of this and what happens with it. It's really interesting. Really interesting.
There's also the question, because of it, can other clubs who have suffered because of their games, the results against these clubs? I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it already suggested, a £300 million lawsuit against Everton. Now they've had their punishment hit out. The likes of Leeds taking part in that. I mean, it could open up the floodgates to all kinds of goings-ons here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it could. I mean, and they're not the only ones. You know, I don't know if Liverpool are involved in it or not. I know they were mentioned at one point, but I don't know whether that's ongoing or it's not. It didn't go anywhere. But Liverpool lost the league 2 years for a point to Man City. So if you're talking about clubs suing other clubs because of it, that's going to get so messy, isn't it?
There'll be a knock-on effect for so many clubs, you know. If Man City aren't involved, another club could have gotten the Champions League, which then another club gets in the Europa League, etc., etc. The relegation battle, it could get
Where
right
does it
messy.
stop?
Exactly. It's could have opened a can of worms, I think.
Massive one.
Yeah.
Well, it is. It doesn't bear thinking about where it could go. Because, like you're saying, Clarky, you've got them clubs, and then you've got clubs who could say, well, hang on a minute, we played them in the cup, and they fielded these teams, and we got done out of £100,000 if it was like a lower league club. And then you think all these clubs who've played City are going to come back and say, well, listen, they've broke the law, and this is what it doesn't bear thinking about how much money it doesn't matter to Manchester City, I don't imagine, because of whatever fine they get is whatever fine they get, and I don't think it's going to be a problem for them, but it certainly does open a massive can of worms.
Have to see where it goes.
And we didn't even speak about England.
You didn't? Prediction for tonight, England-Malta?
5-0.
10-0.
Harry Kane with 4.
I agree with you, Daz.
Brilliant. Well done, fellas. That's another one out the way. At least next weekend, next Friday night when we meet again, you can talk about the games that are happening, because footy will be back. Local footy.
Good.
Get in.
All right, then. Have a good weekend.
And you
too.
See you later,
all the
fellas.
best, lads.
Cheers, lads.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
There you guys.
banter at its best across the Northeast. It's the Three Legends.
The Toon, the Red and the Cat.